I'm going to, just to start, because some of these speakers have already presented in two of the breakout rooms, so let's just go down to the end, which is Craig, right? So Craig, you want to introduce yourself, your company for the crowd, just 2-3 minutes, here's what I do, and then we'll just go down the audience. And the first question I'm going to ask you, just so you can prepare while you're thinking, is I want you to, we've had a lot of content today, where do we go tomorrow? So this crowd, the folks here have really been hearing a lot about visionary 5-year futures, to your point. Patrick, we talked about this at lunch, and you said it in your presentation as well. It's not just 5-year vision, right? It's practical. Where do we start? There's a lot of really cool things that we've talked about that are coming down the line. So just from the end over there, if you can start, let's come down here, and then we'll go back down the line. And this is going to be an interactive. After they ask or answer the question about where do we start tomorrow, I want to hear from you guys. So, you've also been very quiet, very patient today. If you have any urgent questions or thoughts about your companies and what you need to be relevant starting tomorrow into the next decade, we'd like to hear from you as well. So feel free to ask the panelists any questions you wish as well. So let's get started.
Thank you, everybody. Craig Proctor-Parker. I'm from a private consulting practice accident specialist. We're based in Durban. We deal with all technical aspects. It happens to be mostly automotive, but we do deal with cranes, workplace slip and fall injuries. So on that basis, it's fairly broad spectrum. Probably 75% of our work is automotive. But in all of those spheres, we deal with telematics to some level and some sort. So it's directly relevant to what we do. Thank you.
Eugene Herbert, the CEO of Master Drive. It's a company that specializes in changing driver behavior through the intervention of driver training, which, as I've seen on one of the panelists in the discussion I had in the breakaway room, it's all about managing risk, of which driver training is one component. And with us, we're about ready to launch a money-back guarantee on our training. And therefore, the use of telematics is critical because we have to understand what happened before, what has happened during the intervention, and then measure its efficacy after the intervention has been concluded, which will help us to get a better picture of where we are and what we're doing.
Hi everyone, I'm Steve Buer from Trojan Corp in Fleeted. We have the stands at the back there. Our business is really focused around just in a very basic level, providing intelligence information to help make intelligent decisions, whether that's through visual cameras to help you see what's on the road, or through data and understanding your costs of your vehicles. In terms of where we're going from a telematics perspective and where to from now, I think it's about taking all this information that we've generated here and harness it and finding the best way to implement it to your system. Each fleet is different, and each fleet has its own application constraints, and it's about using this information to find a way to apply it in the right way.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Paul Hendricks, owner of Safe Drive Pods. My part is distracted driving and to solve the problem also. What I heard a lot is about the future and also combine all the telematics information, but there are also topics that we need to solve directly, and it is possible. And that's also my question to the group is, how can we act on certain groups have a vision, but also act directly?
Okay, I think it's on. Hi, I'm Malal Mashale. I am running a company now called Smart Cloud. My primary focus now is mainly in the security space around machine learning, machine vision, to preemptively predict patterns and what people are doing in order to prevent crime from happening. I think everybody's well aware of the crisis that's happening in the country. But I think long-term where I want to be taking my company is in lieu of part of the presentation that I presented in terms of the critical use cases for Internet of Things, what you call telematics is basically a bigger industry of Internet of Things, and there are 15 key use cases which are applicable across a number of different industries. So I'll be generally growing into that.
It's Patrick O'Leary. I'm a publisher and managing editor of Fleetwatch magazine. As a magazine, telematics is one of the arenas we look at as an holistic view of the trucking industry. So we deal with from new trucks to used trucks to telematics to driver issues to everything. We mainly get involved in the issues of the industry. So we get quite a holistic view of everything, you know. Yeah, and that's what we do. We try to tell it like it is, so that the market knows how it is.
Patrick promised to teach me some Afrikaans tonight, right? If you were in his presentation earlier, you know that he's got some choice Afrikaans. So there's a PhD student that I met from Berkeley who spent the last 2 years in Kenya. And she's looking, this is about behavior of people behavior. And she's studying this interesting pattern where passengers of motor coach buses have an option. They can take a bus, and you actually covered this, I think, Patrick, in one of your sessions about unsafe roads. You can take a bus, it's not going to cost so much money, but it's going to take the unsafe road and it'll get you to your destination faster. Probably the coach isn't going to be too comfortable either, and the road condition isn't going to be that great. Or you can take the more comfortable vehicle, the nicer motor coach. It'll take the safer road. Will take a little bit longer to get to your destination, but you're going to likely get there safely and certainly more comfortable. The vast majority of people choose the unsafe road. The vast majority choose the unsafe road, and she's trying to figure out why. They're actually pricing the model now. They're literally looking at, well, at what point do people make the decision that safety is no longer something that you can discount, and we want to actually have people choose the safer, more comfortable vehicle. It's a really interesting problem we have, right? So how can we curb the behavior? We've talked today about drivers with video cam. We all know we shouldn't be using our phones when we're driving, for crying out loud, but people do it. So just going down the line again with you guys, like, talk to me about how would you feel that we can affect change, like truly affect change? Starting tomorrow, what are the words we can use back in our businesses as partners or as end customers? How can we start to maybe relate to drivers of vehicles differently? How can we maybe relate the pedestrian story differently? What are your thoughts? Maybe we can start with you, Patrick, and go down the line.
Okay. Sure, how do you change people's attitude? You got to kick your asses every now and again, and I mean that, because people don't listen. And people know it all, and it will never happen to me. You know, it's never going to happen to me, which I suppose is a self-defense mechanism, otherwise we'd never get up in the morning. We've tried a number of things of changing attitudes. The one that we used the emotional era, and we got 600 Kodak cameras, and we gave them to the drivers, and we did little frames, and we said, take pictures of your family and stick it on your dashboard. So that before you do anything stupid, you'll look at your family, and that'll make you stop doing something stupid. It worked quite tremendously, you know, it was quite good. The threats, the incentives, they don't seem to work. I don't see a lot of change in behavior. Enforcement, we don't know if it works or not because there is none. So it'll be interesting to find out if enforcement does work, because we don't. We just bribe our way around South Africa. Changing people's behavior, I think, is the end question. Last thing, do you go the horror route? I've often thought so. I've got a video that I got yesterday of a guy on a motorbike. A tire came off and knocked his head off, and there's his head lying in the road. Do you show people that? Do you go into the accident scene and show the heads, the bodies? I'm just talking safety here. And to show the heads and the bodies. Victoria did it in Australia, and very successfully. And John Schnell was in KwaZulu, the late John Schnell was going to say, let's go that route. He went over to study it. They had a tremendous impact on that. But changing people's behavior is terribly difficult. I think when you go personal, and someone don't want to be too long, but in South Africa, the problem is road safety, and it's a body count. There's not a name attached to it. There's not a family attached. It's a statistic. We deal with statistics here. We're not dealing with people. We're not dealing with Colin. We're not dealing with Craig, with anybody here, Mary, Tom. We're dealing with number 1, 2, or 3. And then you juggle the statistics to make you look good. So it's just a body count. Yeah. There's not much motion here. I hope someone's got a better answer than I have, because I don't actually have the answer.
I think I take a very different perspective. Necessity drives people into certain behaviors. We've got people who are climbing up poles and cutting high-powered cables at the risk of death because they can't sustain livelihood. So if I'm put in a situation where you're saying, I'm going to the same point and you're going to charge me $10 more, I'd rather take the one that's more economically friendly. My safety comes secondary. A very good metric that we used to measure was home security systems in the country. So one of the biggest growth areas that was identified internationally was home automation and security. In South Africa, it's barely even scratched the surface, and it's not going to, because people don't have enough stuff to protect, the majority. Yes, we're sitting in this space and it warps our view, but if you go a couple of kilometers out again to the townships, you'll see that people don't have security electric fences, they don't have an armed response, they don't have anything to protect because they're so focused on using all their funds on just surviving. So in the same sense, if I'm going to commute, I mean, I look at the taxis that are always tipping over in accidents, etc. The person saw it before they got on the taxi, that this thing is not as safe as it should be, but it's what they can afford. So if we change the conversation and not look at the symptom, but actually deal with the actual problem, then you will change behavior.
Very good.
You agree on? Yeah, sorry. Fully agree on that. And I strongly believe that rewarding good behavior is a step forward, but I'm totally not confident that it will solve the problem. It also has to be in our minds. We see within big fleet companies sometimes that the CEO says, yeah, I'm interested in investing in safety for my people, but not for me. Because they think they are allowed to use, for example, the phone while driving. And that is typical in our minds that we say, okay, safe for somebody else, but not for me. We don't want to interact on that. So it will take a lot of time also to change behavior. But that was also with the seatbelt in the 70s. I think my parents didn't like it at all. And now I can't order a car without. And that is also a big step forward. So it also takes a lot of time to move forward. But we need to address that. We need to act on these topics. And not say, there is a problem, let's see what will happen.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that to effect change, there's no one answer to that. I don't think there's one quick solution to effect change. I think it takes hard work. I think it takes continuous work. I think that as fleet managers, you need to continuously hit home at the drivers on what needs to be done. It doesn't work having one conference with them or one annual getaway with the drivers to show them the risks of poor driving. They need to know about it every single day. We did it in one of the customers we consult with. We regularly monitored their driving scores and their driving behaviors, and as long as they're down the line managers, we're doing the job and daily managing those drivers and showing them where their faults are and what they're doing wrong, we saw a downward trend in the exceptions and an increase in the scoring. As soon as we stopped seeing that and saw an increase in the trend, we could go back and see that the managers had stopped doing what they were doing. They weren't affecting the change with the drivers. And I think that's a big start to what's needing to happen, is the guy that on the road, on the ground, the fleet managers need to actually be working continuously with the drivers and continuously looking at how they can better improve the way they manage their fleets.
Just a word of caution, Colin. Just check those words that Patrick teaches you with some other South Africans here, right? They need not be kosher. The answer to your question is multifaceted. And if I can deal with it from two perspectives. One, well, firstly, we can't expect government to drive it because they may have the best of intention, but the reality is just that they can't. But I sit on the board of, I think it's about 4 or 5 NPOs, and we use those as an opportunity to drive into the underprivileged communities. And I'll give you an example for one. Legislation was passed a while ago about the wearing of seatbelts for children or the use of seats. And we know what the consequences are if you don't wear a seatbelt. Wheelwell is an organization that, through the good offices of a number of companies, collects pre-owned baby seats, all right, reconditions them and puts them out there for those who can't afford to buy a new one. So there are people out there that can't afford, and I take the point, but we endeavor to make it available to those whose desire is to provide a safer environment for the child in which to live or in which to drive. And of course, there's others. There's an organization, Global Road Safety Partnership. We get funding from abroad, from various foundations, and we use that to drive an education at school level one of the motor manufacturers participates, for example, on safe to home, safe to school. That they get taught through there, and now they carry that message with them, and hopefully they influence their parents. So that's at a social level. At a commercial level, we deal 90% probably with corporates who have a very strong health and safety policy. We then drive that through to their drivers. They're very strong on it. There's awards. Organizations don't allow their staff to use cell phones, for example. They then, and we make it available to their spouses. These people then become ambassadors. And I know it's a very limited scope. I don't know if anybody's ever watched that Simon Sinek's movie of The Why of Business. And he speaks about people knowing what they do, how they do it, but why they do it. And the why of our business is making a difference one day, 1 kilometer, one life at a time. We can never hope to achieve a total solution for everybody. But by embracing it and engaging it with other like-minded organizations and individuals, we make a little bit of a difference one day at a time.
Beautiful.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think the original question was, where do we go tomorrow? First of all, I think I agree with all my colleague speakers here. It's definitely not an easy answer. But I think for me, the two comments that I can give to everybody in order for all of us to take back and to implement is, one, let's all put a concerted effort in across the board, be we the suppliers, be us the end users, to stop the me, my, and I. In South Africa and worldwide, there's a massive me, my, and I. And I'm actually proud to say that I came to this Geotab conference because I went to a very similar conference without mentioning any names, but I got the very distinct impression that the hierarchical people at Geotab don't suffer from the me, my, and I. So let's all put the effort in to learn, cooperate, facilitate, and consult with everybody across the board, and let's try and improve the situation primarily for us here in South Africa and worldwide. And then the second issue is, we are pretty much all aware that in South Africa there is no proper database. Let's not get into the issue of slandering different departments that should be maintaining this. But I think this conference speaks for itself in saying that statistics are the way to drive things forward in whatever realm to make things right. So let's all put the effort in by not being me, my, and I. Let's cooperate. Let's use these statistics and not worry about the fact that we don't have proper statistics here in South Africa, and let's implement what we can to make the situation better. Thank you.
It's an interesting idea, Craig. Thank you. That, for example, the Paris Accord kind of blew up on the CO2, but we haven't seen a slowing down of the fleet industry to say, thank God Paris is gone, we don't have to worry about CO2. Fleets are taking it among themselves to deal with it. So do you feel that it's even possible? Because I agree with you, you had the same sort of situation happen in Latin America, where that's such a fractured part in South America. But the people that believed in safety and wanting to affect change, that we can form our own association. Because associations are really important, right? Associations of mind thinkers that can affect change, and then they become a lobby group to government. Or sometimes you just say, we're going to go and take it upon ourselves. So do you think that's even a possibility with the South African culture, that you could find leaders like yourself that are really thinking about this, that you could create a small working group, maybe starting right here, the genesis, and 1 year from now we'll say, you know what, we left Geotab Africa and we came back 1 year later, and you know what, we took it up and we actually formed a little working group to see what we could do to start up that statistical database or share data amongst each other and solve just one problem at a time, maybe tapping into Mike Branch's resources on the data AI side. Do you think that's even a possibility, that the businesses can take some of these bigger, heavy challenges upon themselves?
Thanks, Chair, again. I think you've hit the nail on the head, and I think you're already doing that. You yourself standing here, and all of us here, are already a party to, so to say, an association that we've started. And by doing this networking and working and cooperating together and stopping the me, my, and I, we are already doing that. Mm-hmm. But yes, in terms of formalizing it, let's all formalize it. Let's all put the effort in here. Let's not be shy. Exchange numbers, exchange emails, talk to each other. Let's get that going, even if it's not formal. Let's put the effort in, all of us. It starts with us. There's an old saying that says, everything starts with an individual. Let's all put the effort in here and do exactly as the chair is advising. Let's drive it ourselves. Let's push pressure on government to follow suit, to make sure that every vehicle has tracking, and use that data. Let's push it. Let's all drive it ourselves.
Yeah, we saw, I spent a lot of time with IHS for vehicle ratings, and it's something called a 4-star rated vehicle. 4-star rated has basically roll bars, it's crash rated. And we find that just as a standard for the fleet industry is specify 4-star rated vehicles. So we were with Billiton down in Australia, and they specified 4-star rated vehicles. And then they took this beautiful bucky, thank you very much, Russell, took a beautiful bucky, and then they sent it to their upfitter, who put an additional roll bar on the back with lights, and they compromised the safety of the vehicle by doing that. It actually started rolling over. So when you buy a 4-star rated vehicle, it's built to be safe. But it's interesting, so that was Billiton's learning was why mess with something that's already built for safety, but they do specify 4-star rated equipment. And to your point, Patrick, when I'll just share a short story with you about the misalignment of people in an ivory tower. Like, we're sitting in head office and working with a very large client with us in Mexico. And they started talking about our technology for all their vehicles. Of course, they also have hijacking that takes place, and they have two-way radios, and we disable the engine if the vehicle's been stolen. And they said, well, we want to do a circle check. And I said, cool, circle check. We do that all the time, mobile app. You walk around the vehicle. You see the tires are good, the brakes are good, vehicle in good condition, it's drivable. And he said, no, we need to do a circle check. And I never understood it. We have to have buttons at all the corners, front, back, side to side. And I never understood it. So then we went on site down in Guadalajara and visited one of their locations and saw the vehicle. It was early in the morning. And I saw these little U-brackets bolted onto the front bumpers and the side. And I said, what are those for? He said, those are for the flags. And I said, what are the flags? He said, well, we put these 4 orange flags on the sides and the front. And every time the vehicle stops, the driver puts 4 flags in the corners of the vehicle, and he goes and he does his job. He comes back out, and he removes the flags. And that's a circle check. I said, well, why do you do that? It's to prevent people from sleeping underneath the vehicle. Because they were having pedestrian fatalities that while he was in delivering goods, people were sleeping underneath, and then he would start the engine and roll over them. And that was actually the highest cause of pedestrian fatality, was people sleeping underneath their vehicle as he drove off. So when we in corporate technology office thought a circle check meant something different, the reality was something completely different, and it was very eye-opening for me personally. At that same company, to your point, Patrick, they have posters put up, and I apologize for the women in the room, but they call them have huevos. If you know what a huevos is, it means like big eggs. So you're a man, have huevos. You know what I'm talking about. Yeah, you can tell me an Afrikaans later. But the whole point was, return to your home safely at night. That was the big slogan. They had posters all over the place. It was, being a man means coming home safely to your family. And they had this real problem with machismo down in Latin America, thinking men don't have to be safe. So they had to sell. The campaign was literally that. Men bring themselves home to their families at night. So what you said earlier really resonated with me. It reminded me of that story. It was quite a cool story. Let's talk about analytics and just predictive diagnostics a little bit. I think we were talking about that earlier, Eugene, about drivers behind the wheel. And maybe you can expand on your thoughts around the importance of diagnostic data and how we can use more predictive analytics to get inside drivers.
I think the context of our discussion was that we attend many conferences such as this, and there are organizations, they talk about their ability to provide predictive analytics. Sadly, I don't think it is that. It's more predictive statistics. They've taken statistical data, and out of that they've extrapolated what could occur or what might occur. And the point that you made in your earlier introduction, and you gave an example of how a driver, based on the manner in which he was driving, could be predictive of the fact that he would have a crash. Now that's awesome, because if we've got that technology or that information, we can sideline the driver, introduce corrective behavioral change before he has the crash. Now, a lot of the information, and I'm quite sure there must be Geotab customers who get all this data, but they don't do anything with it. One reason, they don't understand it. Second, they think by telling the person, or possibly even penalizing them for a mistake, such as harsh braking or something like that, they solve the problem. But what we have to do is accept, in our earlier discussion on the other side there, we use 85% of our brain for driving and only about 15% is a physical component. And when you have a look at how we engage with people, trying to change behavior, we focus on the physical as opposed to getting the mindset change. And that's where we've taken a lot of our training, addressing the actions that take place in the frontal lobe. That's the executive decision making, etc. And if we can educate people or drivers to make use of that, inevitably we will share the road with a safer person. A statistic which you may not be aware of, about 50% of driver's licenses have been obtained in a fraudulent manner. So you and I are sharing the road with somebody who doesn't even know the basics of driving. We understand why they get those licenses, because it's a passport to a job. Now, if they're in an organization, and that's why I make the point, we've chosen the route to try and effect behavioral change at a level where people can afford it. Interesting statistic, one of the public companies, Pick and Pay, run a big safety program. One year we gave away 300 free courses. Okay? Now, that's for people who have got a license and they could come and choose to participate. Do you know what? We got a response of 30%, and of that 30%, I think half of them asked if it could be exchanged for cash. Mm-hmm. So there's a lack of desire, because sometimes, as Patrick pointed out, it won't happen to me. And if we, through educational programs, and I've seen them in Europe, where people realize that they're vulnerable, and if we can get that part, we can tap into their emotions, because you may not see your wife or your family at the end of the day.
That's true. Mila, when you were talking earlier about, I love IoT stuff, right? And you're an IoT guy. To me, the convergence of, I said it earlier today, the convergence of vehicles with mobile is what has resulted in Uber's emergence, right? It's actually enabled Amazon to rocket forward as well, right? So I'm interested, because as an IoT person, how do you see the transformation of the South Africa market, who may just still be thinking, I just need connectivity, but you need to encourage businesses. Everybody in this room is thinking, well, IoT is important, but how can you consult? Because you're a consulting organization. Are you available to work with businesses on consulting roadmaps of why you should go and upgrade your bandwidth? I'm interested in what your thoughts are. Now you just launched your new consulting company.
So I was actually just thinking about it from the context of the question that you asked earlier on. We've got a lot of companies that are reporting on the current vehicle status, and it needs servicing now, which is okay. I guess it's a level up from where we are. But then there's a whole bunch of trending data that you've now got in terms of a VW that is driven in Johannesburg over the last 10 years starts to experience these kind of problems. Who's the guy that's contacting me from the VW dealership saying to me, you've got a VW and it's about to have all these incidences, it's going to cost you X amount, I could actually give you a new one and it could be almost paid for by the shortfall. We're not yet stepping into that next level of data to make us make more intelligent decisions. So I think that's probably the space that I would like to consult in, and the type of discussions that I want to have with enterprises.
Do you find that it's naturally, people are curious, and I don't know whether or not, Paul, you've had the same kind of experience with in the market where you've got sometimes cellular outages and dark spots and some GPS jammers and cellular jammers. Do you find that people just sort of write that off and that, well, there's nothing we can do about it, so we have to just live with what we have right now? Or do you really find that people are kind of motivated to make the change and to invest in new technologies?
So I think it's a bit of both. People don't know what they don't know. So in some instances, the level of education dictates whether they feel they can change their circumstances. But in the same sense, 3 years ago, we started a platform called the IoT Conference and Award. It wanted to achieve a number of specific things. One, we wanted to understand what pockets of innovation are happening at a macro level. And because as a big enterprise, we can't innovate at the same speed, how do we partner with these guys and go to market, white label their solutions, etc. The winners from the first year were just bought over about 2 years ago for R500 million. The second winners were bought over for 3 billion rands by Vodacom. And the last guys who won last year, they've just signed a contract with Zaro for about 200 million rands. All of these companies were worth less than 10 or 20 million rands when we discovered them. So within a very short space of time, by giving them exposure and complementing their offering with the MTN's connectivity, they were able to leapfrog. And I think that is a very good sign of what is starting to come out and how people are seeing things very differently. I speak at Enactus, which is entrepreneurship in action for students. And one of the things that I always tell them is that 90% of the products that you need to create your solutions are free. You can download them off the web, SDKs, plug into it. So ideas are worthless. Build something and then start consulting with a customer, and then you'll unlock a commercial opportunity.
Yeah, Gerber Tech also is kind of cool to me because I mentioned earlier this morning that we just have an SDK, but you need to build those integrations between our platform and your ERP or CRM. So Gerber Tech is very valuable, and I think your experience is also very valuable for this crowd to tap into your
100%.
resources. Yeah, Paul, I mean, any thoughts on, because you live this, you remind me of a tree hugger, but you're like, I don't know what you call a distracted driver tree hugger. We have a complete division of our company with about 100 employees that are every single day excited to come to work because they're saving CO2. They love it. They're absolute, hand on heart, saving CO2 on the planet. And you're kind of different. You're like, I'm saving lives. I'm really passionate about that. That's why you started your company. So because you're dealing with this necessary evil, mobile devices are with us all day long, you're trying to go and help us with that. But what have you found are the barriers for success? I mean, is it just, why aren't people just buying your widget? I mean, my God, it's the simplest thing in the world. Why isn't it just being adopted like that?
Yes, yeah, that would be heaven.
Yeah.
Everyone adopts it because everyone understands it. The problem we have with our solution is we are selling handcuffs, and that is the difficulty of our product. Do everyone realize the problem? Yes. Do they want to adopt? No. They want to see the benefits. They want to see the benefits in saving lives, and sometimes they see a picture. It is not me. It is somebody else. It is not me, I'm the best driver. I'm coming from Holland, and all Max Verstappen, I think. So we think in Holland we are all Max Verstappen. But it isn't. And sometimes it is annoying. Yes, of course. We know it is a great solution and we want to move forward today and not tomorrow because we want to save lives. Mm-hmm. But I fully agree, we need to work hard, tell the story, and what I really like is think about working together and start a movement. And that's what we need to do, and that's exactly what you are all doing within Geotab. When we talk about telematics, I think it is the totally Wild West. There are so many companies who are selling telematics, but don't know how or have the open source mind, work together, and but it is annoying sometimes.
Are there any questions from the audience? And you've been very patient out there, but do you have any questions that you'd just like to get out before the end of the day and we break for cocktails and so on? If not, I've got one last round of questions for our panel. Okay, that's cool. If you think of something, you can come up later on and ask. So I'd like you to sort of wrap up with one word that is when you go back next week and you're in your offices and you think, how do you think differently after spending all day with us today? Just give me like one word that sort of inspired you from today or that you're going to remember from this conference. Patrick, we'll start with you.
Only one.
Only one. That's hard for you. I know it's very hard for you. I totally understand that. I sat for 40 minutes for your 20-minute presentation.
I'm going to take two words and combine them into one. Responsibility, accountability. That's one word. I feel
response accountability.
Responsibility. Responsible and accountable.
Beautiful.
That's what comes out of it.
Responsible, accountable. That's fantastic.
Sorry, it was two words.
We'll make it Afrikaans. I'm sure it's one word in Afrikaans somewhere.
Can I contextualize the one
you
word?
Can.
Because it's a bit difficult to put just one word.
Yeah.
I think for me, innovation disruption is required in order to change anything from culture to what's happening in the different industries. But if we learned one thing from this conference is partner, because you can't do it by yourselves.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Partner.
Partner. Yeah.
One word doesn't. I would say act together, but also act right now.
Very nice.
Sure, one word. So I think for me, the biggest takeaway out of today is harnessing. So harnessing data, harnessing technologies, harnessing integrations, bringing it all together as one is for me the biggest takeaway.
Very good.
Optimism, and to make that happen, Vishnu has decided to chair the committee that will take this to the next step. Does that make sense?
Perfect.
Thank you.
I think for me, Chair, the word is heart, as in your heart, because it's in your heart. You either do the right thing or the wrong thing, whether you're a supplier, whether you're an end user, it's in your heart. You do the right thing and make sure whatever you do is benefiting everybody or somebody.
That's beautiful. Milan, I think you used the word disruption, and we're in an age of business disruption. There's no doubt about it. Disruption sounds at the face of it as a negative word, but actually, we were at a conference in November called Design to Disrupt. So I believe in a lot of ways that our open platform and with great partners like yourselves, we are enabling businesses to compete, which means we're enabling our people to be positively disruptive, right? So I want to thank you all for joining me on the panel today. It's been a real pleasure. And thank you to everybody else for today, from a Geotab, from my heart. Thank you, Craig. From my heart, really, this has been a tremendous conference. Thank you so much.